So today's video is going to be a very brief overview of the autonomics. If you remember from our original discussion on nervous system, remember it's broken into the central nervous system as well as the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system consists of our brain and our spinal cord, but our peripheral nervous system consists of these efferent or motor neurons and our afferent or sensory neurons. And then those efferent neurons were further broken into somatic and autonomic. And so this is where our focus is going to be. So our autonomic nervous system is involuntary. Remember, we can't control it, right? We can't tell our stomach it's time to digest food. We can't tell our blood vessels to dilate. So it is involuntary, consisting of motor nerves only, with our two divisions, again, sympathetic and parasympathetic. And we're going to look at each one of those divisions in just a minute. So let's do a quick comparison between our autonomics and our somatic nervous system. So our somatic nervous system is only going to have one motor neuron, where our autonomics is going to consist of basically a 2-neuron chain. And so it's going to have what we call a pre-ganglionic neuron and a post-ganglionic neuron. A quick reminder on that. Remember, a ganglia from our last video is a group of neuron cell bodies outside of the CNS. So basically what will happen is it will have a neuron, and then it will have a second neuron that will then go to the effector. And this right here will be my ganglia. Right? And then effector-wise, in our somatic nervous system, our effectors are going to be our skeletal muscles. Right? I have control over these. I can move my arm when I want to move my arm, move my leg when I want to move my leg. In my effector organs, in my autonomics, these are going to be things that I don't know how to control, right? Like smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. Remember, effectors are always muscles and glands. And so our somatics has our voluntary things that we can control, and our autonomics has our involuntary things like our smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. The neurotransmitters that we're going to see released at the somatic nervous system, if you remember, that was acetylcholine at that neuromuscular junction. We'll see that later, abbreviated ACH. Our autonomics will also use acetylcholine, but will also use epinephrine, or more commonly, norepinephrine. These are what we think of as adrenaline. Okay, so if we look at this in picture form, we can see our somatic nervous system up here at the top. Okay, one long neuron here going all the way down to the effector, which is my skeletal muscle. In my autonomic nervous system, I see in both my sympathetic and parasympathetic, there's a synapse in between. So it's a 2-neuron chain with the ganglia there. I have my pre-ganglionic neurons, and then I have my post-ganglionic neurons. And you'll see how in the picture, you can see how the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, those are a little bit different. Short pre-ganglionic and sympathetics, long post in the opposite in parasympathetics. We're going to talk about each one of those. Sympathetics and parasympathetics, you will see both of them also influence all of these things, the smooth muscle, the cardiac muscle, and the glands. Okay, so let's start with our sympathetic nervous system. The nerves of our sympathetic nervous system originate between the levels of T1 and L2. So these nerves are originating in the thoracic and the very top of the lumbar region of your spinal cord. The ganglia for these neurons, for these sympathetic nerves, are near the spinal cord. So what this is going to mean is that these are going to have a short preganglionic neuron and as a general rule, and a long postganglionic neuron. right? They have 3 ganglia associated with them, kind of 3 clumps or groups of ganglia. They have what we call the sympathetic chain ganglia. If you look at your image here on the right, you'll see all of these bumps. These are our sympathetic chain ganglia. So a pretty short preganglionic neuron, right? And then they'll have a longer postganglionic one. If you look in the picture on the right side of it, you'll see the red and the green, right? Here's our preganglionic neuron and then our much longer postganglionic neurons. So the sympathetic chain, the nerves that go through that sympathetic chain ganglia, they're going to control things in the head, the body wall, neck, limbs, and the thoracic cavity, so chest organs. The collateral ganglia, the ones that go through the collateral ganglia, which are these 3 right here, the ones that go through the collateral ganglia there, those are controlling the abdominopelvic organs. And then we have our exception, because there's always an exception to the rule, and that's the adrenal medulla. This one has a long preganglionic neuron that goes all the way to your adrenal gland. This is your adrenal gland. Goes all the way to the adrenal gland and synapses there at the effector. The adrenal gland is going to release our adrenaline, and so it has our widespread effects, not just one particular area of the body. So sympathetic chain, head, body wall, neck, limbs, thoracic cavity, collateral, abdominal, pelvic. So basically, if you remember, collateral is abdominal, pelvic, sympathetic chain is everything else. And then the adrenal medulla, like I said, that adrenaline release has an impact on multiple organs throughout the body. The neurotransmitters that our sympathetic nerves use, the preganglionic neurons are going to release acetylcholine, and the postganglionic, as a general rule, are going to release norepinephrine. So the neurons that release acetylcholine are considered cholinergic, and the ones that release epinephrine are adrenergic. So if I have my little chain here, right, my preganglionic neuron, postganglionic neuron, and then my effector. So acetylcholine is being released here, and norepinephrine is being released here. So our sympathetic nervous system is also called our fight or flight response. A way that can help you remember it is by calling it our E division. This is the division that's triggered when we exercise, when we get excited, when an emergency happens, when we get embarrassed. All of these things cause stress, which is part of, again, that fight or flight response. So some of the things that we start to see when we're under this stress, whether it's good or bad stress, our pupils get larger. We dilate our pupils to make sure that we can see, right? We take in as much light as possible. We actually stop producing saliva. Our mouth starts to dry out because, to be honest, what do we need it for? We're not going to be eating right now at this time. The bronchi relax. What that will do is that will help dilate the bronchi so I can get more air, right? So it's going to increase oxygen because I need oxygen to make ATP to make my muscles work, right? So my heart rate's going to go up, right? Which in turn usually makes my blood pressure go up. Okay. I'm going to inhibit peristalsis and secretion. Basically, what this means is that I'm going to stop digestion. Okay. I'm not really going to be pushing food through my intestines. My body's not going to be putting its resources into breaking food down right now. However, I am going to put my resources into releasing glucose because remember, I need glucose and oxygen to get all the ATP that I need to have the energy to do whatever it is I need to do for this fight or flight response. And so a lot of these reactions are going to be caused by the release of adrenaline or noradrenaline. So that's epinephrine, norepinephrine. Okay? And I'm going to inhibit bladder contraction. I'm not going to be going potty right now. Okay? That is not where my body is going to be sending its resources. Okay, so our parasympathetics are centered from the brainstem, including cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10, and then down from the sacrum, S1, S4. So up here at the brainstem, down here at the sacrum, and then remember sympathetics are in the middle there in that thoracic region. Okay, so our parasympathetic division has a terminal, so a ganglia at the end at the effector organs. So what this is going to mean is I'm going to have a very long preganglionic neuron and a pretty short postganglionic neuron. So that's going to be the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. So a really long preganglionic neuron that's going to go kind of all the way out to where the effector is, and then a short postganglionic that's going to synapse directly with the effector. You can see that in this image here. You see there are initially our long preganglionic neurons, and then these little tiny short postganglionic neurons. My neurotransmitter here is acetylcholine all the way. So here at the preganglionic neuron, I release acetylcholine, as well as here at the postganglionic neuron to the effector, I release acetylcholine. So these will be cholinergic. Remember, it's cholinergic when it releases acetylcholine, adrenergic when it releases the norepinephrine or the epinephrine. And I don't have any of that epinephrine release happening with the parasympathetics because this one's doing the opposite. I'm not getting ready for fight or flight. I'm calming down. So our parasympathetic response, this is our rest and digest. This is our normal everyday body functions, right? This is our body conserving energy. Right? And essentially, recovering and doing our normal daily necessary body functions that need to happen. So how we call our sympathetic system our E division. This one is our D division. So instead of fight or flight, I'm resting and digesting. So I'm doing digestion, right? So I'm stimulating the flow of saliva now, right? I'm going to produce more saliva. I'm going to increase digestion. Peristalsis is the movement of the food through the digestive tract. So I'm going to increase the movement of the food through the tract, the secretion of the enzymes to help digest it, the release of bile to help me break down fat. Okay? Defecation. Defecation is going number 2, right? So I'm going to encourage the elimination of feces from the body, as well as diuresis. Diuresis is urination. These are the times that I'm going to be going to the bathroom, right? You see, I've contract the bladder. Okay? I'm constricting the pupils. I don't need as much oxygen, so the bronchi can constrict some. My heart rate, my blood pressure, those things can all go down now because I am resting and digesting. Okay, so these are the basics of our parasympathetic and sympathetic. There's a lot more detail, in particular with how those sympathetic nerves are formed. Please don't get bogged down in that picture. Just kind of focus on the fact that they've got that shorter preganglionic neuron, the longer postganglionic. These are my 3 ganglia, and we kind of will go from there. And we'll work some more practice with this in class.